from the Netherlands with my black. This is my news of Tari by Remy Jumayanjalis, from the Netherlands with my Black African Diaspora news. My first news of today is source 2CTV via YouTube. Breaking: Maduro set to FLE Venezuela. Trump prepares military attack coverage. Breaking: Maduro may flee Venezuela amid U.S. military pressure. Venezuela faces a potential leadership crisis as President Nicolás Maduro reportedly considers fleeing the country following escalating tensions with the United States. Earlier today, former President Donald Trump issued a direct warning to Maduro during a phone call, indicating that if he did not leave voluntarily, the U.S. might take military action. Shortly after, the U.S. declared Venezuelan airspace closed, impacting all incoming and outgoing flights, while U.S. forces mobilized in the Caribbean, particularly around Puerto Rico. Reports suggest Maduro's presidential plane may have touched down near the Venezuelan-Brazilian border, though it remains unclear whether Maduro himself is aboard or if it is a decoy. The Islamic Republic of Iran has offered Maduro asylum, and Venezuelan officials have publicly thanked Iran for the offer. Other potential safe havens discussed include China and Russia, although their involvement is considered unlikely in any immediate military context. Meanwhile, Venezuelan generals are reportedly rehearsing defensive operations in preparation for potential U.S. airstrikes. The situation has prompted heightened vigilance across the Caribbean, including Tobago and surrounding islands. Domestically, the opposition leader Maria Machado is poised to take leadership if Maduro departs, although her team has faced significant media criticism and political attacks. Analysts note that Venezuela's communist dictatorship is heavily centralized around Maduro. His departure could result in swift political change. The U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee has stated that it will conduct oversight regarding any potential military action, and both U.S. and Venezuelan military movements remain under close watch. While there is speculation on social media about Maduro's exact location and intentions, confirmed information is limited, and developments are ongoing. Summary: Venezuela stands at a critical juncture, with the possibility of Maduro leaving the country amid threats of U.S. military intervention. The international community is closely monitoring the evolving situation, which could result in a significant shift in Venezuelan leadership and regional stability. My next news of the day is source APT via YouTube. Trump stay there. Trinidadians react as Caribbean tensions rise with Venezuela airspace closure. Trinidadians react as tensions rise between the U.S. and Venezuela. Tensions in the Caribbean are escalating following U.S. actions toward Venezuela, including the closure of Venezuelan airspace announced by former President Donald Trump. Residents and tourists in Trinidad have expressed mixed feelings about the situation, emphasizing both safety and concern over potential regional fallout. Many Trinidadians stressed that their daily lives remain unaffected and that the island feels safe and comfortable for families and visitors. One local remarked, "Trump should stay there, Trini stay here," reflecting a desire to remain uninvolved in external conflicts. Others voiced concern about Trump's off-the-cuff decisions, noting that such escalations create uncertainty and tension in the region. Some residents highlighted Trinidad's history of multicultural coexistence, emphasizing that the island could serve as a model for peaceful living despite the ongoing geopolitical tensions. At the same time, there was concern for the Venezuelan people, who are already suffering under political and economic hardships, and for the broader Caribbean, which could be affected by any conflict or military escalation. Questions were raised about America's preparedness and strategic planning, including what contingency plans exist if military actions against Venezuela occur. Many noted that Trinidad's small military would be ill-equipped to respond to such a conflict and expressed skepticism about the level of support the U.S. could realistically provide, considering its global military commitments. In summary, Trinidadians are watching developments closely, feeling both confident in their own safety and concerned about the humanitarian and geopolitical consequences of U.S.-Venezuelan tensions in the Caribbean. My next news of the day is Trump stay there. Trinidadians respond to Venezuela airspace closure. As tensions rise between the United States and Venezuela over Trump's airspace closure and military buildup, Trinidadians share their perspectives on safety, politics, and regional implications. Tourists feel safe despite tensions. Families visiting Trinidad expressed comfort and safety, saying the islands are beautiful and scenic with no reason to feel nervous. Many emphasized that Trump's actions in Venezuela should not affect their vacation plans. One tourist said, "Trump should stay there. Try to stay here," highlighting the sentiment that local life continues undisturbed despite Venezuela tensions. Cautious awareness of U.S. actions. Some visitors admitted surprise at Trump's recent escalation against Venezuela. While acknowledging the president's unpredictability, they took a pragmatic approach, choosing not to let political developments deter them. One traveler reflected on previous nervousness about visiting the U.S. but emphasized the importance of personal experience over fear of political rhetoric. Regional perspective and morality. Locals stressed Trinidad's multicultural society as a model for peaceful coexistence, emphasizing unity across diverse ethnicities. Many criticized the U.S. approach toward Venezuela as morally wrong, arguing that ordinary Venezuelans should not suffer for political disputes. Trinidadians voiced frustration at potential conflict affecting the Caribbean, without clear plans for post-conflict stability. Do they even have that sort of forward thinking in terms of what they're doing? Security and military concerns. Given Trinidad's small size and limited military, residents questioned local capacity to respond to regional fallout. Skepticism was expressed regarding the effectiveness of U.S. intervention in nearby countries, noting that American forces are spread globally. Concerns include logistical challenges for any U.S. deployment and the lack of a clear contingency plan for Caribbean nations. Conclusion. Trinidadians are largely confident in their safety and critical of U.S. intervention strategies in Venezuela. While they respect the power dynamics at play, locals emphasize regional autonomy, moral responsibility, and the importance of protecting ordinary citizens from geopolitical conflict. My next news is U.S. Venezuela situation based on the Al Jazeera Inside Story episode. U.S. Venezuela tensions overview. Tensions between the United States and Venezuela have sharply increased. President Donald Trump declared Venezuela's airspace closed and deployed a massive military presence to the Caribbean, including over 15,000 troops, fighter jets, a Navy destroyer, and the U.S. Navy's largest aircraft carrier. Trump claims these actions target narcotics trafficking, accusing Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro of running a major drug cartel. Maduro rejects these accusations, describing U.S. measures as colonialist and a threat to Venezuelan sovereignty. Motives behind U.S. actions. Regime change. Experts argue that the U.S. focus is less on drugs and more on removing Maduro from power. Venezuela does not produce significant amounts of cocaine or fentanyl. It is mainly a transit country. The U.S. strategy pressures Maduro and his military inner circle, hoping to install opposition leaders like Edmundo Gonzalez and Maria Corina Machado. Sabatini warns that military intervention risks chaos and instability, mirroring past U.S. interventions in Latin America and the Middle East. Economic interests. Some analysts suggest that Trump seeks access to Venezuela's resources, including oil and minerals. However, the U.S. is already energy self-sufficient, so tapping Venezuelan oil is not economically essential. Any new regime might allow U.S. firms more influence, but resource exploitation is secondary to political objectives. Ideological and political factors. U.S. actions resonate with domestic constituencies, particularly Cuban-American and anti-socialist voters. Trump and advisors like Senator Marco Rubio view this as part of a broader struggle against leftist regimes in the hemisphere. U.S. support for right-wing candidates in other Latin American elections reflects a strategy to maintain influence in the region, sometimes dubbed the Donald Trump Doctrine. Implications for Venezuela. Widespread sanctions and potential military escalation mostly harm ordinary Venezuelans, who already face severe economic hardship. Any intervention may destabilize the country further, creating uncertainty about who would govern if Maduro is removed. Observers warn that a U.S.-backed regime does not guarantee stability or good governance, given corruption and entrenched illicit activities in Venezuela. Lessons and risks. Historical interventions in Latin America, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Haiti highlight that toppling leaders rarely leads to immediate democracy or stability. The US risks creating more problems than it solves, with political and economic fallout both in Venezuela and internationally. Experts stress that while regime change may seem desirable politically, it carries high humanitarian and strategic risks. Conclusion: while Trump frames his actions as a fight against drug trafficking, evidence suggests the main goal is political, removing Maduro and installing a US-friendly leadership. Economic and ideological considerations also play roles, but the most significant impact will be on the Venezuelan population, who face increased instability regardless of outcomes. My next news is, Trump claims US economy is in a golden age. Do Americans agree? Source: Al Jazeera English economist Peter Atwater. President Donald Trump has described the US economy as being in a golden age, insisting that conditions are fantastic. However, many Americans feel financially insecure, struggling with the rising costs of essentials like food, housing, healthcare, and childcare. Economist Peter Atwater explains the divide as a K-shaped economy. Those at the top, stockholders, investors, and AI industry participants, are thriving. Those at the bottom, middle-class workers, small business owners, and low-income families, are facing worsening conditions, dealing with inflation, job scarcity, and rising costs. Atwater points out that policies such as tariffs, immigration restrictions, and government budget cuts, DOGE, have had mixed effects. Tariffs may help some manufacturing sectors, but automation and AI reduce labor-intensive jobs, limiting benefits for the bottom half of the economy. Immigration changes could raise wages but leave gaps in sectors like agriculture, hospitality, and tourism, creating labor shortages. Cuts in government spending have negatively affected education, healthcare, and social services. Polls show that 74% of Americans, including Republicans, Democrats, and independents, see the economy as fair or poor, reflecting frustration and anxiety about affordability. Atwater warns that economic dissatisfaction could impact voting behavior in the upcoming 2026 elections, as voters at the bottom look for tangible solutions. He also highlights AI and technological change as an urgent concern. Top earners anticipate gains and productivity boosts. Workers at the bottom face immediate costs, job displacement, and fewer opportunities, creating a sense of economic unfairness. Bottom line: while Trump touts economic prosperity, most Americans do not feel the benefits. Rising costs, limited job growth, and the uneven impact of technology and policy make many citizens skeptical of his claims, potentially influencing political dynamics ahead of 2026. My next news is, Venezuelans react to Trump's threat to close airspace. Source: DW News, journalist Alvaro Algara, Caracas. President Donald Trump announced that the airspace above Venezuela could be closed and warned that U.S. land operations against alleged Venezuelan drug traffickers might begin soon. A U.S. task force is already in the region, with 15,000 soldiers and 15 naval vessels, including the aircraft carrier USS Gerald Ford, capable of carrying 90 planes. On the streets of Caracas, residents expressed anxiety and uncertainty, balancing fear with the need to continue daily life. "We are all afraid, but we must continue with our lives," said one citizen. Another described a tense calm, unsure when or how conflict might arise. President Nicolás Maduro reaffirmed his willingness to engage in dialogue with the United States, while also stating that Venezuela is prepared to defend itself if necessary. Maduro emphasized peace as a priority but highlighted readiness to protect national sovereignty. According to journalist Alvaro Algara, many Venezuelans are hesitant to discuss politics openly due to years of political repression, including over 800 political arrests, more than 30 journalists in prison, and dozens forced into exile. The opposition is reportedly supportive of Trump's pressure on Maduro, viewing it as a potential path to regime change. Though public discussions remain muted, ordinary citizens are primarily focused on survival, as government salaries in the public sector average only $4 to $5 per month, while the economy struggles. Algara highlighted that Venezuelans are bracing for uncertainty, while the situation continues to unfold in the Caribbean, noting the high tension and restricted freedom of speech in Caracas. Summary: while Trump's statements have increased fear and uncertainty in Venezuela, Maduro maintains a dual approach of dialogue readiness and defensive preparation, reflecting a population caught between economic hardship and geopolitical tension. My next news is, Uganda ready for war? Museveni threatens Kenya over sea access. By Zach Mwekasa, English Channel. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni has warned that tensions could escalate with Kenya over access to the sea. He emphasized that if Kenya continues to privatize or restrict Uganda's access, it could potentially lead to conflict in the future. Museveni, a seasoned military leader, stressed that Uganda cannot build a navy or fully control its trade because it is landlocked. He pointed out that Uganda relies heavily on Kenyan ports such as Mombasa and Lamu, and occasionally Tanzania, to import goods like petroleum, cement, iron, steel, and manufactured products, and to export its own products. Key points from Museveni's argument. Landlocked disadvantage. Uganda must negotiate with coastal countries to access the sea, adding costs and delays. For example, shipping a container from Asia to Mombasa might cost $2,000, but transporting the same container to Kampala can add another $2,000, doubling the expense for Ugandan importers. UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Adopted in 1982 and enforced by 1994, this law allows landlocked countries like Uganda the right to access the sea but recognizes the rights of coastal states to control territorial waters and ports. This means Uganda must pay fees, tolls, or levies imposed by Kenya or Tanzania to move goods through their territory. Territorial waters. Coastal states control 12 nautical miles, approximately 19 kilometers, from their shores for exclusive rights, and an exclusive economic zone, EEZ, extends 200 nautical miles, approximately 370 kilometers, for resource exploitation like fishing, mining, and oil. Potential for conflict. Museveni warned that the restrictions imposed by coastal states on inland countries could create disputes, comparing the situation to a resident on a second floor of a building having to pay the ground floor just to receive deliveries like a pizza. Economic impact. Uganda is frustrated with paying additional fees and wants fairer access to global trade routes without being blocked or overcharged. The video also discussed parallels with other African regions, where countries like Morocco have helped landlocked neighbors gain access to ports when coastal states restrict trade for political or historical reasons. Conclusion. President Museveni did not declare war but highlighted that continued restrictions on Uganda's access to the sea could potentially lead to conflict. The central question raised is whether inland countries should have unhindered access to the sea without paying additional fees to coastal states, ensuring fair trade and regional stability. My next news is Caribbean News Global. Canada, Jamaica reaffirms strong support following Hurricane Melissa. Kingston, Jamaica, November 30th, 2025. Randeep Sarai, Secretary of State for International Development, accompanied by Greg Fergus, Member of Parliament for Hull Aylmer, concluded a two-day visit to Jamaica focused on advancing recovery, strengthening resilience, and deepening bilateral cooperation. Secretary of State Sarai met with Ambassador Audrey Marks, Minister without portfolio in the Office of the Prime Minister with responsibility for efficiency, innovation and digital transformation, and Commander Alvin Gale, Director General of the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management, OHKANO, to discuss Jamaica's ongoing relief efforts, emerging needs, and the resources required to strengthen the response. He also received an operational briefing on Canada's support through the Operational Support Hub in Kingston and explored priority areas for long-term collaboration. Fully operational since mid-November, the Operational Support Hub is providing immediate logistical and humanitarian assistance. With 77 Canadian Armed Forces members deployed, the hub is coordinating the movement of foreign military disaster assistance teams of up to 200 personnel. During the visit, Secretary of State Sarai met with development partners and community stakeholders to advance coordinated recovery efforts and discuss strategies for long-term climate resilience. He traveled to communities hardest hit by Hurricane Melissa, including yam farmers in Endeavour, Saint, and whose livelihoods were severely affected. Through the Global Affairs Canada funded Sustainable Agriculture in the Caribbean (SAC) project, farmers received recovery kits valued at 150,000 Canadian dollars, marking the first in a series of interventions to support small farmers' recovery. In St. Anne, he toured the St. and Bay Health Center with State Minister of Health and Wellness Crystal Lee and Peiho Country Director Ian Stein, engaging with health workers and response teams. He also visited the Jamaica Red Cross Distribution Center with representatives from the Canadian Red Cross and the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, IFRC. The visit concluded with a dinner at the official residence with Government of Jamaica officials to discuss long-term partnership and continued support. Canada stands shoulder to shoulder with Jamaica as partners in recovery and resilience. Together, we are building a stronger future by supporting communities, advancing sustainable development, and empowering people to overcome challenges and thrive, said Secretary of State Sarai. Canada continues to support Jamaica as it rebuilds. In response to Hurricane Melissa, Canada has provided over $7 million Canadian dollars in humanitarian assistance, including emergency food, relief supplies, emergency health services, water, sanitation, and hygiene support. Canada is also matching donations to the Canadian Red Cross Hurricane Melissa appeal across the region, up to $1,500,000 Canadian dollars. High Commissioner Mark Berman, who accompanied Secretary of State Sarai and MP Fergus throughout the visit, underscored Canada's long-term commitment. Canada is fully committed to supporting Jamaica as it works through the far-reaching impacts of Hurricane Melissa. This visit reinforced how our assistance is making a real difference on the ground, helping families recover, supporting critical services, and strengthening systems that protect lives and livelihoods. We remain dedicated to advancing Jamaica's recovery and long-term resilience in partnership with the government and people of Jamaica. This visit follows a high-level engagement earlier this month. On November 5th, Prime Minister Mark Carney spoke with Jamaica's Prime Minister, Andrew Holness, conveying Canada's sympathies after Hurricane Melissa and reaffirming Canada's commitment to Jamaica's recovery. He highlighted Canada's emergency assistance and the activation of the Canadian Armed Forces Operational Support Hub to support regional relief. The leaders also met on the margins of the G20 summit in Johannesburg, where they underscored their shared ambition to further strengthen the Canada-Jamaica partnership. As part of immediate support, Canada announced $6,100,000 Canadian dollars in development assistance to help repair health facilities, strengthen emergency response systems, and accelerate food system recovery. Canadian companies and volunteers have joined the effort, supporting power restoration, search and rescue operations, and education initiatives, reflecting the strong partnership between both countries. Canada's humanitarian assistance is delivered through established partners working with the Government of Jamaica and the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, DEMA. Additional support has been channeled through pooled humanitarian funds, including the UN Central Emergency Response Fund, CERF, the Red Cross Disaster Response Emergency Fund, DREF, and the World Food Programme Immediate Response Account. My next news is Caribbean News Global/OECD. From informality to inclusion, sharing Latin America's rural resources. November 30th, 2025. Latin America's rural communities produce much of the food, energy, and minerals that the world depends on. Yet for many rural residents, the promise of lasting prosperity often remains out of reach because, despite this wealth, insecure and informal work is widespread, undermining livelihoods, services, and long-term opportunity. Regions of global significance. Latin America is the world's largest net food exporter, with food exports reaching a record $349 billion in 2022. The region also produces 35% of the world's lithium and 40% of its copper, minerals essential for clean energy and digital devices. However, in the rural regions that produce this wealth, people often struggle to access stable jobs, fair wages, or basic services. Informality is widespread, and worse in rural areas. Informality lies at the heart of the problem. Across the region, about 2/3 of the population live in households reliant on informal work. In rural areas, 66% of people live in fully informal households, nearly double the 34% in urban areas. In some countries, it is even higher. 85% of Colombia's rural residents and over 90% of Peru's live in fully informal households. Informal work is often low paid, with informal workers earning on average around 60% less than formal workers, and many earning below minimum wage levels. It is also insecure, providing limited access to training, finance, or social protection, including healthcare and pensions. While often the only way for low-income individuals to make a living, it has far-reaching impacts across community life. When most jobs are informal, tax revenues fall, constraining investment in infrastructure, road maintenance, schools, and healthcare. This can trap rural communities in a cycle of underinvestment and exclusion. Why informality is prevalent in rural areas. Many jobs are seasonal, family-based, and tied to agriculture, making formal employment arrangements harder to sustain. Local governments are often overstretched, law enforcement is limited, and the economy is dominated by small, low-productivity firms. Lower education levels also constrain options for workers. Informality in mining. One sector where informality is especially prevalent is mining, particularly for metals like gold and copper. In remote areas, artisanal and small-scale mining, ASM, often operates without contracts, financial services, or social protection. Globally, it is estimated that 80 to 90% of ASM is informal. Gina D'Amato, executive director of the Alliance for Responsible Mining, stated, "Formalization should be a key government goal. It reduces miners' risks by opening access to health services, social protections, and technical assistance, essential for rural livelihoods." Pathways to formalization. Formalization initiatives exist, but complex and costly requirements, alongside weak institutions, often prevent progress. Some initiatives are breaking new ground. One example is the Gramelo project in Colombia, where the Mineros La Maria SAS cooperative partnered with government agencies and Anglo Gold Ashanti under the CRAFT scheme, a voluntary framework that helps artisanal miners manage risks, improve practices, and enter formal markets. In Colombia, cooperatives include almost 6.3 million members. The National Development Plan 2022 to 2026 recognizes that strengthening the national plan for the promotion of solidarity economy and rural cooperatives will contribute to decent work and rural employment. By combining legal support, technical assistance, and training, the partnership helped miners meet sustainability standards and enter formal supply chains. In just 3 years, it created nearly 400 formal jobs, boosted tax revenues, and improved access to education and social protections for families. It also provided access to training, safety gear, credit, and financial services. Gina D'Amato added, "Recognition as formal citizens helps decrease gender inequalities by enabling equal pay and representation. It provides a structure to address distinct needs fairly. Trust and transparency build stronger communities. Responsible business practices are not just legal requirements. They are essential to build trust and long-term economic success. Certified and traceable suppliers open doors to responsible markets and sustainable investment opportunities." In Peru's high-altitude Anania region, cooperatives use certification processes to demonstrate compliance with environmental and social standards. Government oversight, community participation, a general law on cooperative societies, and strong enforcement underpin these efforts. Certified cooperatives reinvest profits into local infrastructure, such as water access and education, providing new generations with assets and opportunities. Gina D'Amato said, "We have seen that when governments, companies, and communities manage to build trust, it becomes possible to establish a real roadmap toward formalization. These partnerships can transform territories, but without trust, efforts collapse quickly." A more inclusive future for mining communities. Latin America's rural communities are already rich in resources. By investing in formalization, governance, and trust-based partnerships, including through cooperatives and social enterprises, they can become rich in opportunities for workers too. Turning resource wealth into lasting well-being requires long-term commitment from governments, businesses, and communities. With the right tools and trust in place, rural regions can move from informality to inclusion, building futures that are productive, fair, and sustainable. My next news is Caribbean News Global. Barbados, Panama discusses tourism. November 28, 2025, Bridgetown, Guyana, a tourism memorandum of understanding (MAU) is being proposed to strengthen the relationship between Barbados and Panama. The outcome follows talks between Minister of Tourism and International Transport Ian Gooding-Hill and Panama's ambassador to Barbados, Xiomara Perez Rodriguez, during a courtesy call at the ministry's One Barbados Place, Warrens, St. Michael office, on Wednesday, November 26. The two officials agreed that tourism is a vital sector for both countries. Ambassador Perez proposed that reciprocal tourism delegations and other institutional exchanges be pursued to enhance bilateral relations. The proposed MAL will cover areas such as civil aviation cooperation, support in strengthening human resource capacity, and reciprocal promotion of each country's tourism offerings, particularly heritage tourism, with Barbados positioned as an eastern hub. The officials also discussed food export and cargo supply chain opportunities, medical tourism, language immersion programs, the upcoming International Economic Forum for Latin America and the Caribbean 2026, and increasing Copa Airlines flights to Barbados. Currently, Copa Airlines operates 4 flights per week, on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays. Minister Gooding-Hill expressed appreciation for the ambassador's engagement and the existing partnership. Thank you for your deep thoughts in terms of the way forward. We are truly grateful that the partnership between Barbados and Panama continues to grow. We're equally happy that we were able to secure an airlift out of Panama, and that we have grown the airlift, which has allowed us to open more borders and increase connectivity into the Americas as well. But it's also created a wonderful opportunity for Panamanians and others within the Americas to come to Barbados and see what we have to offer. We're going to continue to work with that relationship and take it from strength to strength. We believe that when we look at the geography of the area, notwithstanding the historical context, it will be a wonderful opportunity for us to continue to partner. In response, Ambassador Perez said she looks forward to developing the MAU and continuing to build bridges between Panama and Barbados while expanding connectivity. Also present at the courtesy call were Acting Permanent Secretary, Tourism, Deborah Norville, Permanent Secretary, International Transport, Charlie Brown, Acting Chief Technical Officer Dion Gibbs-Nichols, and Foreign Service Officer 2 Warren Howard. Barbados established diplomatic relations with the Republic of Panama in August 1975. My next news is Caribbean News Global. Belize secures WTO Fish Fund grant to strengthen fisheries subsidies governance. November 28, 2025 Belmopan. Belize, the government of Belize has announced that the World Trade Organization's Fish Fund has approved the Building Legal Understanding and Enforcement Capacity for Fisheries Subsidies Reform in Belize, Blue CAP project. The grant, valued at $300,000 United States dollars, will help Belize build the legal and institutional capacity required to manage emerging fisheries subsidy programs responsibly. The aim is to ensure these programs support livelihoods without inadvertently encouraging harmful fishing practices. The Blue CAP project complements ongoing blue economy initiatives, such as the Inter-American Development Bank-supported program to expand artisanal fisheries and the National Blue Economy Development Policy and Strategy, by pairing financial and livelihood support with strong governance and compliance frameworks. Together, these efforts reinforce Belize's vision of a blue economy that is both economically empowering and environmentally sustainable. The success of this application reflects close collaboration among the Directorate General for Foreign Trade, the Ministry of Blue Economy and Marine Conservation, the Fisheries Department, and the High Seas Fisheries Unit, in partnership with the Caribbean Regional Fisheries Mechanism, CRFM. Belize expressed gratitude to the WTO Fish Fund Steering Committee and Secretariat for their support and looks forward to working with national and regional partners to safeguard marine resources for future generations. My next news is Caribbean News Global. Jamaica's cabinet approves $150 million United States dollars loan to JPS to speed up restoration efforts. November 28, 2025 Kingston, Jamaica. The Jamaican cabinet has approved a $150 million United States dollars loan to the Jamaica Public Service, JPS, to accelerate restoration efforts without extending the company's existing license, which is set to expire in 2027, Minister of Energy, Transport and Telecommunications, Darrell Vaz, disclosed during a statement to the House of Representatives on Tuesday. Minister Vaz explained that due to the damage caused by Hurricane Melissa, urgent restoration work requires substantial funding. The Emergency Disaster Fund, EDF, the company's self-insurance mechanism for repairing its transmission and distribution network after natural disasters, including Hurricanes Beryl and Melissa, has been depleted, he said. As of right now, that fund, based on the claims that had been made already to prepare for Melissa, has been exhausted. It means that the JPS has 2 years on a license and they have to raise money to restore. Following a meeting with the Minister of Finance and the Public Service, Fayval Williams, Minister without portfolio in the Office of the Prime Minister responsible for efficiency, innovation and digital transformation, Ambassador Audrey Marks, Financial Secretary Darlene Morrison, and JPS representatives, an agreement was reached. We were able to work out on November 24 and get approval by Cabinet. An agreement to fast-track the restoration to end of January, latest early February. This is on the basis that the government of Jamaica is not prepared to negotiate any extension of any license other than the process that is going to take us from now until 2027, when this existing license expires, Vaz told the House. JPS had previously projected the earliest restoration dates for the worst affected areas as April to May 2026. Minister Vaz added, based on the fact that we need restoration as a country in the shortest possible time, the government has agreed to loan the JPS $150 million United States dollars, on the basis that they will use that money, which is estimated at $75 million United States dollars a month, to restore the entire grid, save for any special areas that may not be reachable, but the major areas by the end of January, latest early February. The loan will span 5 years, with the interest rate to be finalized by the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. JPS will have the option to repay within 2 years, Vaz assured, because that is when the license expires. They'll either have a renewed license, or they won't have a license. If they have a license, they can attract financing, and if they don't, the government has already indicated to them, based on our June/July 2025 letter, that we are prepared to acquire the assets of the Jamaica Public Service, which means our money is fully protected, so there is no risk to the Jamaican government or taxpayers. What we have done is skillfully separate a negotiation of a loan and untie it from all of these proposals of extensions. The minister added that the loan will allow JPS to hire an additional 300 linesmen, supplementing the existing 170. JPS has committed to me that they can have those trucks and men here by the second week of December, and that by Christmas morning, Grand Market night, they are committing, especially in the hardest hit areas, to bring back light at the most strategic locations. Vaz said. My next news is Caribbean News Global. Sir Ronald Sanders on Dr. Ralph Gonsalves. November 29, 2025, Washington, USA. Sir Ronald Sanders released a statement concerning Dr. Ralph Gonsalves. He said, I have known Dr. Ralph Gonsalves since before he succeeded Sir James, son Mitchell, as Prime Minister. I worked with both men and admired and respected them in different ways, except one, and that one exception is the exact and firm commitment to Caribbean unity which they both displayed. Ralph Gonsalves is an intellectual giant of the Caribbean. His writings, his many speeches, lectures and public statements were invaluable lessons about the importance of integration for the people of the Caribbean. He is steadfast in that commitment and diligent in infecting everyone with his passion. The region, as a collective, owes him full recognition for his caring and his courage. The people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines spoke decisively on November 27 when they elected a new government, and the will of the people must be respected at all times. However, the stature of Ralph Gonsalves has not been diminished, nor has his standing as a warrior for the people of the Caribbean. He continues to deserve our deep respect, even as we wish the new government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines every success in the stewardship of the people's affairs. My next news is Caribbean News Global. Prime Minister Brown writes to new and former leaders of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. November 30, 2025. St. John's, Antigua. Prime Minister Gaston Brown has written to Dr. Godwin Friday, congratulating him on his election as Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. The letter, sent from Morocco on November 28 while Brown attended an international conference, affirmed his commitment to working closely with Dr. Friday to strengthen cooperation within the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, OECS, and CARICOM, and to advance shared regional priorities. Prime Minister Brown also wrote to outgoing Prime Minister Dr. Ralph E. Gonzalez. Acknowledging his 24 years of leadership and his significant contributions to Caribbean integration and public service. Brown expressed appreciation for Dr. Gonzalez's friendship in council, noting that his legacy endures and speaks for itself, and extended best wishes as he continues his service in Parliament. Prime Minister Brown reiterated Antigua and Barbuda's commitment to maintaining strong relations with St. Vincent and the Grenadines and to deepening cooperation for the benefit of the peoples of both countries. My next news is Africa news. Israeli raid in southern Syria leaves 13 dead and several soldiers wounded. The Israeli military released footage of an overnight operation in southern Syria, in which its troops entered the village of Beit Jin to detain 3 members of the Islamist group Al-Jama'ah al-Islamiyah. According to the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, the raid sparked heavy clashes between Israeli soldiers and armed militants in the area. Local reports indicate that at least 13 people were killed during the fighting. The IDF confirmed that 6 of its soldiers were injured, including 3 in serious condition. The military stated that the targeted suspects were involved in cross-border activities posing threats to Israel's security, but provided no further details. The operation represents one of the most significant Israeli incursions in the region in recent months, highlighting escalating tensions along the Syria-Israel frontier. My next news is Africa news. Parents of children kidnapped in Nigeria continue painful wait for news. The parents of children abducted last week from a school in Nigeria's northern Niger state gathered on Friday to provide authorities with additional information. Last Friday, gunmen abducted 303 students and 12 teachers from St. Mary's School in Papiri. 50 students have since managed to escape, according to officials. Authorities have deployed tactical squads, working alongside local hunters, in an attempt to rescue those who are still being held. Joseph Demas' 7-year-old son is among the missing. He said he was contacted by someone at the school and told to come forward with details about his family and his child. He explained, "The authorities need our attestation to come and ask us to investigate us. How many children do we have? And that is the reason that we came here, to come and say, to tell the names of our children, and also the location where we are." Armed groups. Nigeria continues to battle dozens of armed groups operating in remote areas where government authority and security presence remain limited. The crisis has become increasingly complex as militant groups from other parts of the Sahel have joined Boko Haram factions, seeking to expand their influence across northern Nigeria. Just days before the Papiri attack, 25 girls were kidnapped in neighboring Kebbi State. Analysts say armed gangs frequently target schools to pressure the government into ransom negotiations. No group has claimed responsibility for either attack. On Wednesday, Nigerian President Bola Tinubu announced that he has declared a nationwide security emergency, ordering additional recruitment into both the army and the police. For Joseph Demas and the other parents, the agonizing wait continues. "My prayer is to see my child come back safe and sound without any problems," Demas said. My next news is Africa news. Norway's special envoy to Sudan confirms there is no new United States-backed peace proposal. The head of Sudan's armed forces has welcomed the clarification from Norway's deputy foreign minister and special envoy to Sudan, confirming that no new United States peace proposal has been presented to the Sudanese government. Last week, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who also leads Sudan's Transitional Sovereign Council, denounced what he believed to be a new United States-backed plan that would dismantle the Sudanese army. However, during a meeting with Buren in Port Sudan on Thursday, Norwegian envoy Andreas Kravik said the general had misunderstood the situation. Kravik stated, "The only proposal remains the one tabled several weeks ago. Suggestions to the country are without foundation. We urge all parties to continue engaging on the basis of that proposal. And it is also critical that a humanitarian truce is followed by an inclusive political process towards a unified and stable Sudan." In September, the United States, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the United Arab Emirates jointly proposed a 3-month humanitarian ceasefire aimed at preparing the ground for a permanent end to hostilities and restoring an independent civilian-led government. More than 2 years of conflict between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces has created what the United Nations describes as one of the world's worst humanitarian emergencies. At least 40,000 people have been killed, and 12 million have been displaced. Kravik urged both sides to implement a humanitarian truce and resume a credible political process to stabilize the war-torn country. My next news is Africa news. Former Nigerian president condemns ceremonial coup in Guinea-Bissau. Former Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan has sharply criticized the recent military takeover in Guinea-Bissau, describing it as a ceremonial coup, after soldiers appeared on state television claiming control of the country. The takeover followed reports of heavy gunfire near the presidential palace, occurring just 3 days after national elections. Jonathan questioned the unusual circumstances surrounding the event, pointing out that President Amaro Sissoko Embalo himself first announced the coup and even addressed media organizations during the takeover. He remarked, "Military don't take over governments, and the sitting president that they overthrow would be allowed to be addressing press conferences and announcing that he has been arrested. Who is fooling who?" Jonathan called the situation quite disturbing for those who support democratic governance. President Embalo was already facing a legitimacy dispute, with opposition leaders insisting that his mandate had expired and refusing to recognize him as the rightful president. Guinea-Bissau has long been plagued by political instability, experiencing repeated coups since gaining independence from Portugal more than 50 years ago. Analysts warn that the latest turmoil threatens fragile democratic progress in the nation of 2.2 million people, which continues to struggle with deep poverty and persistent drug trafficking networks. My next news is Africa news. Zuma's daughter resigns amid claims South Africans were lured into Ukraine war. The daughter of former South African President Jacob Zuma, Duduzile Zumasembudla, has resigned from parliament amid growing controversy over allegations that she played a role in luring South African men into fighting for Russia in the war in Ukraine. Zumasembudla, who had served as a lawmaker for the Umkhonto weSizwe MK party since June 2024, submitted her resignation with immediate effect. Announcing her departure, MK Party National Chairman Nkosinathi Mliko said Zumasembudla had declared her full cooperation with the ongoing investigations by relevant authorities. He added that the party leadership had accepted her decision to step down from the National Assembly and from all public representative duties. MK Party head of presidency Mabasila Mzobi emphasized that the resignation should not be interpreted as an admission of guilt. He described her move as that of a disciplined member who recognizes the need to resolve the national question of returning the affected young men safely home. He noted that her priority is now to cooperate fully with state institutions investigating the matter. Earlier this month, the South African government confirmed that 17 South African men, aged 20 to 39, had issued distress calls claiming they were trapped in Ukraine's eastern Donbass region. According to an affidavit filed by Zumasembudla's half-sister, the men were allegedly misled into believing they were traveling to Russia for lucrative employment opportunities and security training, only to be drawn into the conflict once they arrived. My next news is Africa news. Hundreds protest in Spain in support of Christians kidnapped in Nigeria. Hundreds of people gathered outside the Nigerian embassy in Madrid on Saturday to show solidarity with Christians who have been kidnapped and attacked in Nigeria. The protest follows the abduction of more than 250 children from a Catholic school in northern Nigeria just over 1 week ago. Christiana Wereboko, president of the National Youth Council of Nigeria, urged international aid organizations and foreign governments to increase their involvement. "We are standing on behalf of Christians, representing Nigerian Christians," she said. "Please intervene and do something regarding the killings of Nigerian Christians." Nigeria has endured 2 separate mass abductions of schoolchildren in the past 3 weeks, along with a deadly assault on a church service. Gunmen also attacked a predominantly Muslim school in Kebbi, abducting 30 students before the government later secured their release. Security experts say the rise in kidnappings is largely motivated by ransom payments, noting that schools remain easy targets due to insufficient security. This latest surge in violence comes as United States President Donald Trump threatened military action in Nigeria over what he claims is the persecution of Christians by radical Islamist groups. Human rights researchers, however, argue that Islamist militants such as Boko Haram have killed more Muslims than Christians, pointing to a complex and multi-layered security crisis rather than a single targeted campaign. The Nigerian government in Abuja rejects accusations of Christian persecution, insisting that such claims oversimplify the situation and ignore national efforts to protect religious freedom. President Bola Tinubu declared a state of emergency last week, strengthening police operations to confront the growing wave of attacks. Since 2014, Nigeria has experienced at least a dozen mass abductions of schoolchildren, with at least 1,799 students kidnapped over that period. Many of those taken have never been rescued. My next news is Africa news. Deadly boat capsize in northwestern Congo leaves 20 dead, several missing. At least 20 people have died and several others remain missing after a boat capsized in northwestern Congo, according to local residents. The wooden vessel, which overturned on Lake Maindam on Thursday, had been transporting passengers toward the capital, Kinshasa. Among the passengers was a newly ordained Catholic deacon, according to a statement issued by the local diocese on Friday. Speaking by telephone to the Associated Press on Saturday, Emmanuel Bola, a resident of the nearby town of Anongo, said the boat had been traveling from the town of Kiri to Kinshasa when it capsized between the villages of Bobini and Labik at around 8 o'clock on Thursday night. The Congolese government has not yet released an official death toll. Kobani Nkoso, the governor of Maindam province, stated on national television that authorities are awaiting details from the teams deployed to the field to determine the number of people killed and the number of survivors. Boat disasters had become increasingly common in the Central African nation as more travelers abandoned the country's limited and poorly maintained road network in favor of cheaper wooden vessels, many of which are decaying and dangerously overloaded with passengers and goods. Life jackets are rarely available, and overcrowding is routine. Many boats also travel at night, making rescue operations far more difficult and leaving numerous bodies unaccounted for. Earlier this month, a separate boat accident left 64 people missing. In September, at least 193 people died in northwestern Congo in two separate boating tragedies, which state media blamed on improper loading and night navigation. My next news is Africa news. South Africa humiliates Wales in record 73-0 win in Cardiff. World champions South Africa crushed Wales on Saturday, delivering a record 73-0 defeat on Welsh soil. The Springboks secured their 13th win in 15 games this season, marking the highest points tally the team has ever scored against Wales under coach Rassie Erasmus. For Wales, the result marked their heaviest home defeat ever, and the first time they were held scoreless in Cardiff in several decades. Wales struggled throughout the match, rarely holding possession, while South Africa ran in 11 tries. The match ended on a sour note just minutes before full-time when Springbok lock Eben Etzebeth received a permanent red card for an alleged eye gouge incident. He now faces a disciplinary hearing and a potential minimum 12-week ban from the sport. Etzebeth is the third South African lock to receive a straight red card in November. After the match, Erasmus acknowledged the seriousness of the offense, saying it did not look good, and added that although he was unsure if Etzebeth had been provoked, "That's not the way we want to play." The four-time Rugby World Cup champions will finish the season as the world's top-ranked team. The draw for the 2027 Rugby World Cup is scheduled to take place on Wednesday. My next news is Source Africa News. According to Africa News, Tunisian police have arrested prominent opposition figure Chaima Issa as she participated in a protest in the capital on Saturday. Her detention comes at a moment of intensifying political unrest across the country. The arrest took place just one day after an appeals court issued prison sentences of up to 45 years against a group that includes opposition leaders, business figures, and lawyers. The court ruled that the group had conspired to overthrow President Kais Saied, a decision widely viewed as further evidence of Tunisia's accelerating shift toward authoritarian rule. Moments before she was taken into custody, Issa stood alongside two other convicted politicians and urged Tunisia's deeply divided opposition to unite and escalate nationwide demonstrations against Said's leadership. Speaking to the crowd, she warned supporters by saying, "They will arrest me shortly," and called on Tunisians to continue resisting what she described as tyranny. Chaima Issa herself received a 20-year prison sentence, which she has strongly rejected as politically driven and fundamentally unjust. Observers expect additional arrests to follow as the government continues to clamp down on political dissent. Human Rights Watch condemned the court ruling on Friday, describing the trial as a travesty of justice. The latest developments come against the backdrop of President Said's sweeping power grab in July 2021, when he suspended parliament and dramatically expanded his executive authority, enabling him to rule by decree. Since then, he has detained numerous critics, while insisting that his actions are lawful measures aimed at ending years of political instability and widespread corruption. Tunisia now faces a deepening political crisis, with opposition leaders warning that the country's democratic institutions are under severe and escalating threat. My next news, Africa news. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has formally requested a presidential pardon in connection with his long-standing corruption case, a legal battle that has stretched for more than 5 years and deeply polarized the nation. In a televised address, Netanyahu argued that ending the trial on bribery, fraud, and breach of trust charges would serve what he called the public interest. He claimed that the criminal proceedings are obstructing his ability to govern effectively during what he described as a period of immense challenges and significant opportunities for the State of Israel. According to Netanyahu, national unity is essential to confronting these issues, and the continuation of the trial only worsens internal divisions. Netanyahu remains the first and only serving Israeli prime minister ever to face trial while in office. He is entangled in 3 separate corruption cases, and although he continues to deny all charges, he stated that the legal requirement for him to appear in court 3 times per week makes it increasingly difficult to lead the country. He further suggested that concluding the trial swiftly could help reduce political tensions and open the door for broader national reconciliation. The request has drawn sharp criticism. Some opponents claim Netanyahu is prolonging the Gaza conflict merely to maintain his governing coalition and keep his legal troubles at bay. Israel's opposition leader, Yair Lapid, publicly urged President Isaac Herzog not to approve any pardon unless Netanyahu immediately resigns from political life and formally accepts guilt and expresses remorse. The president's office described the petition as extraordinary and highly consequential. President Herzog has confirmed receipt of the request and has passed it on to the Justice Ministry's Pardons Unit for review. He promised a responsible and sincere examination of the matter after all expert opinions have been collected. Historically, presidential pardons in Israel are extremely rare before a conviction, making Netanyahu's appeal even more exceptional. My next news is in the next video. I am Remy Germain Jallis, and this was my Black African Diaspora news of today.